Now, picture this. You just spent $20 billion building an AI campus. Servers ready, cooling ready, everything is ready. And the grid operator looks at you and says, "We can connect you. We just can't promise we'll actually serve you." Now, wait, what? Yeah, because here's the deal. Bring your own generation, accept curtailment when things get tight, pay for upgrades yourself, or get in line. And no, this isn't hypothetical. This is happening right now. PJM, the largest grid operator in the country, just missed its own reliability target. Second year in a row. That's a 6,831 megawatt hole for the 2028 to 2029 delivery year, still unfilled. Now, FERC looked at that and told 6 of the biggest grid operators in America, justify your rules or rewrite them. And NERC is quietly building a system to treat massive AI data centers less like customers and more like power plants. Meanwhile, stay with me here now. I know it's a lot coming out at once, but stay with me. Google is helping finance a salt-cooled nuclear reactor. Meta just assembled one of the largest corporate nuclear portfolios in the country. And 4 separate advanced reactors hit criticality in the same month, beating the federal government's own deadline. So no, the question isn't, can nuclear power AI? The real question is this: is AI about to become the customer that finally makes advanced nuclear financeable? And if it does, what happens to everybody else still standing on the grid? Welcome back to the New Financial World, Powering Tomorrow, where we break down how electricity, infrastructure, technology, crypto, and digital finance actually shape the real economy. I'm your host, Zakir. Now, a couple episodes back, don't get me wrong, I don't have them numbered. It could be number 19. From hash rate to hyperscale, we talked about exactly that shift. And we established something important. A 100 megawatt Bitcoin mine and a 100 megawatt AI facility look identical on paper. Same nameplate demand, but to a utility, completely different animal. Because the AI's load does not want to curtail, ever. And if you go back even further, we said this already in our last couple episodes. AI isn't the story. Infrastructure sequencing is. In that episode, we flagged the coordination problem between digital systems and physical infrastructure. And in the episode where we talked about where AI will actually live, we said capital was already chasing proven power over theoretical. That theory just picked up a number and deadline. And in this episode, we pick up exactly there. If AI won't curtail voluntarily, what happens when the grid tells them to anyway? That's the real story. Not AI needs a lot of electricity. We already know that. That story has been beat to death. The story is now, what happens when the grid operator says, "I can't guarantee you firm power unless you bring your own"? What happens when the reliability regulator starts treating a data center less like a customer and more like a power plant? And why, out of nowhere, are Google, Meta, Amazon, and Microsoft suddenly the ones writing the checks that could make advanced nuclear commercially real? Liquid salt reactors, small modular reactors, are still part of this story. But this time, they're the case study, not the whole plot. Actually, someone asked me this question directly. One of the viewers wanted to know, could a liquid salt reactor actually become part of the engine behind artificial intelligence? Now, hold that thought. We're circling back to it once the numbers are on the table. But like always, people, quick disclaimer. This show is for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. Nothing you hear should be financial, legal, tax, or engineering, or nuclear safety advice. Always do your own research, talk to a professional, and know everything said here is of my own. Not an employer, not an organization. Now, let's break it down. Let's start with the thing that makes this episode urgent right now. For the second year in a row, PJM Interconnection, the grid operator covering 13 states plus DC, ran its capacity auction and came up short Not a little short, 6,831 megawatts short. That's like when you try to go on like a blind date and you swipe and they say, I'm 6'4", and then when you meet them, they 5'8". For the 2028-2029 delivery year, even after hitting the price cap. So on July 31st, PJM went to FERC with a plan. 2 tracks running at the same time. A reliability backup procurement to secure a new supply by fall, and matchmaking track that lets big loads contract directly with new generation. And they're building something new, a registry. Anything over 50 megawatts gets flagged. Here's why that actually matters. For years, the deal with big industrial customers was simple. Request a connection, run the study, get your firm power. Take it wherever you want. That deal, it's changing. Now, when a 500 megawatt AI campus shows up, the grid operator isn't just asking, can we connect you? They're asking, are you bringing your own capacity? And are you okay with interruptible service? Or are you willing to wait behind everybody who already committed generation? 3 different products: connection, firm capacity, curtailable service. And here's the part that changed everything. Large AI loads can no longer assume they're getting the middle one by default. If this sounds familiar, it should. Back in our last episode, AI isn't the story, infrastructure sequencing is. We called this structural load shock. Digital systems scale in months. Physical infrastructure scales in years. Projects sitting in interconnection queues for 7 to 10 years just to get connected. That gap never closed. It just got a number attached to it, 6,831 megawatts. That's the mechanism behind this whole episode title. Bring your own power isn't a slogan anymore. It's becoming an actual regulatory pathway. So that's why AI load is under pressure to bring capacity. Now here's why it's under pressure to behave once it's already connected. NERC, the organization that writes and enforces the mandatory reliability rules for the entire North American power grid, is building a brand new category just for AI and data centers. And we already talked about a couple years ago how they've also updated some things on solar. Modeling and disturbance performance are headed to industrial ballot on August 19th. Registration starts ramping in 2027. Now, why does NERC even care? Because of exactly the kind of event you can point to directly. In 2024, Virginia, roughly 1,500 megawatts of data center load just disconnects all at once across dozens of substations. And here's the thing. The transmission faults that triggered those events, nothing unusual about them, routine stuff, honestly. What was unusual was how much computational load reacted all at once. So NERC's logic is simple. If you're big enough to move frequency or voltage across an entire region, you need to be visible, the same way a major power plant is visible. Modeling, metered data, coordination, and protection settings. And that's a real status change. The AI campus stops being just a buyer of electrons. At scale, it starts inheriting the obligations that used to belong exclusively to major grid participants. Now here's where nuclear walks in as the answer to both problems at once. Back in episode 10, where AI will actually live, we put it plainly. AI is the first true digital baseload. Constant demand, no downtime, no cycles. Most power sources shut off sometimes. Nuclear doesn't. That's not politics, that's just physics matching a customer's load profile. Think about it. If you need firm capacity to avoid curtailment, and you're about to get held accountable for how your load behaves anyway, the cleanest move is to just help build the generation yourself. And that's exactly what's happening. In January, Meta dropped agreements with 3 different companies, combined up to 6.6 gigawatts of nuclear capacity by 2035. 6.6 gigawatts from one company. A 20-year deal with Vistra over 2,600 megawatts from 3 existing plants in Ohio and Pennsylvania, plus 433 megawatts of brand new capacity from power plant uprates. Vistra's calling it the largest nuclear uprate program ever backed by a single corporation customer. Meta's also funding TerraPower's Natrium program, up to 2.8 gigawatts, and Oklo Reactor Campus in Ohio, up to 1.2 gigawatts. Now, Google's version looks different, but it rhymes. Their 2024 deal with Kairos Power is structured to support up to 500 megawatts by 2035, starting with the 150 megawatt demonstration plant. And here's the nuance people miss. Google isn't buying power from private reactors sitting behind its own fence. They're buying the clean energy attributes of power that Kairos sells directly to the Tennessee Valley Authority, which then feeds the regional grid, including Google's own data centers in Tennessee and Alabama. Add it all up, Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft combined nuclear commitments now sit around 13 gigawatts. Here's the mechanism underneath all of it. And this is the part that actually matters. Advanced reactor developers have been stuck for decades, not because the physics doesn't work, because nobody would sign the kind of contract that makes a first kind of reactor bankable. Utilities answer to millions of small customers and regulators who hate rate risk. Hyperscalers are the opposite. A handful of companies, enormous balance sheets, they need firm 24/7 power for decades, and they're willing to prepay, co-invest, sign 20-year contracts to get it. That's the same role government procurement once played for early aerospace and defense. A customer willing to eat first-of-a-kind risk so an entire industry can scale behind it. AI companies might be doing that for nuclear right now, and it's the same. Proven power beats theoretical power. The logic we flagged a minute ago. Amazon anchored data center development around nuclear-backed power in Pennsylvania. Microsoft locked in long-term nuclear supply through Constellation Energy. At the time, that looked like a smart real estate move, buying sites for the grid connections that came with them. Look at it now. That wasn't just real estate. That was the opening chapter of the exact financing story we're telling today. Now, this financing story isn't just an American thing. Two completely different versions of it are playing out right now in India and in Pakistan. And if you're watching this from either country or anywhere across the Gulf, this next part is for you. Let's start with India. April 6th of this year, India's prototype fast breeder reactor built entirely in-house. Now I might butcher some of the pronunciations. Please bear with me. Please bear with me. Built entirely in-house, Kalpakkam reaches first criticality, 500 megawatts, and it moves India into stage 2 of the 3-stage nuclear program the country's been building since the 1950s. Built around India's own massive thorium reserves. That's rare. Only a handful of countries on Earth have ever run fast breeder technology at that scale. At the same time, India passed the Shanti Act, Sustainable Harnessing and Advancement of Nuclear Energy for Transforming India. And here's what that actually does. It ends decades of state monopoly over nuclear power, opens the door to private capital. For the first time ever, Reliance, Tata Power, Adani, Hindalco, JSW Energy, Jindal, Steel and Power, all 6 have formally applied for small modular reactor sites. 16 locations, 6 states. And Adani didn't just apply. They created an entirely new subsidiary, targeting 10 gigawatts of nuclear by 2035, running alongside their own 3 gigawatt AI data center platform built with Google. And the government is not hiding the connection, not even a little. India's IT minister has said flat out, small modular reactors are the practical answer to data centers' power demand. Parliament was told this month that the new nuclear law is a direct response to AI infrastructure strain. And on India's most recent Independent Day, Prime Minister stood up and reaffirmed it, 100 gigawatts of nuclear power by 2047. In the same speech, announcing new semiconductor plants and a nationwide AI training push. That's India's running its own version of the American playbook. Liberalize, invite private capital, tie it straight to AI, except they're starting from state-owned nuclear and thorium fuel, not hyperscaler contracts. Now, Pakistan's story, it's almost a mirror image. Pakistan doesn't have a shortage problem, it has the opposite problem. Years of overbuilt generation, a lot of it coal, sitting there running away under capacity, feeding straight into the country's chronic circular debt crisis. So in 2025, Pakistan did something genuinely unusual. They took 2,000 megawatts of the underused capacity and handed it to Bitcoin mining and AI data centers. Through the new government body, the Pakistan Crypto Council, the framing standard electricity nobody wanted, finally worth something. Sound familiar? Back in the episode, AI isn't the story, infrastructure sequencing is. We said crypto solved this exact constraint years before AI showed up, reacting to power pricing and grid limits before AI clusters ever scaled. Pakistan's basically running that same playbook in reverse. Instead of chasing constrained power, they're monetizing surplus power. Different direction, same underlying lesson. Digital load follow electrons, not hype. And Pakistan is still building conventional nuclear the old way. 6 operating Chinese-built reactors already. A 7th, Chashma 5, 1,200 megawatts, under construction right now, backed by roughly $4.8 billion in Chinese financing. The IAEA cleared the safeguard agreements back in March. The target to be online is around 2030. But the expansion is financed through state-to-state geopolitics, not AI companies signing offtake deals. Generally different model from what's happening in the US or in India. And Pakistani media has already started asking obvious follow-ups. Can a grid with long history of load shedding actually deliver 2,000 firm, uninterrupted megawatts on demand to Bitcoin miners and AI operators? That's the exact same reliability question this entire episode keeps circling back to, just coming from the opposite direction. A country with power to sell instead of a shortage to fill. 3 countries, 3 completely different answers to the same underlying question. Who finances the firm power for a digital economy? And what do they get in return? America's doing it through hyperscaler contracts. India's doing it by cracking open a state monopoly to private capital and its own thorium program. And in Pakistan's monetizing electricity nobody else wanted. Now, this is where the original question comes back around. Could liquid salt reactors actually become part of the engine building artificial intelligence? The clearest case study, Kiros Power's Hermes 2, or Hermes 2, broke ground in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, back in April. So, is Google building a private nuclear reactor behind one of its data centers? Not exactly. And honestly, that version of the story would be easier. The real arrangement is more interesting. Google helps create commercial demand, Keros builds the reactor. TVA connects the electricity to the grid, which means the first AI-linked salt reactor in America might not operate at some isolated nuclear island. It might operate at something much more important. Proof that AI contracts can finance new grid capacity. All right, quick technical grounding kept short. On purpose, Hermes 2 runs on solid triose fuel pebbles, cooled by a molten fluoride salt called FLIBE. I mean, we can call it Fleabay. The fuel is not dissolved in the salts. The salt's just there to carry the heat away. And because molten salt has extremely high boiling point, this is the thing that can run hot without the extreme pressure of a normal water-cooled reactor needs. Hermes 2 is Keros' first commercial scale reactor, first power producing generation for design to get an NRC construction permit, first delivery under the company's fleet agreement with Google targeting up to 50 megawatts to the TVA grid by around 2030. Under the first binding power purchase agreement a U.S. utility has ever signed for an advanced reactor. Now, the real system question, does Hermes 2 prove liquid salt reactors can power hyperscale AI. No, one 50 megawatt demonstration plant is not a fleet. What it can prove, if construction goes well, is the actual chain that determines whether this scales. Construction execution, NRC licensing, salt chemistry, fuel performance, grid interconnection, and whether the contract structure holds up in the real world. Those are the real bottlenecks, not the reactor concept. And one more thing, because headlines get this wrong constantly. Kairos is salt-cooled, solid fuel. That's it. A true liquid-fueled molten salt reactor, where the actual fuel is dissolved in the salt, that's a different early stage category entirely. That took a lot of deep research for me to even understand that they were even both different cases. But that's it. Terrestrial's Energy's in NRC pre-application review for something like that. TerraPower and Southern Company have run molten chloride experiments. And TerraPower's Natrium, Meta's biggest nuclear bet. That's a sodium-cooled fast reactor. Uses molten salt only for thermal storage. It is not a molten salt reactor at all. Salt-cooled is not salt-fueled. Molten salt storage doesn't make something a molten salt reactor. Keep those things straight. An entire advanced nuclear conversation gets a lot less confusing. So celebrate the milestone. Genuinely, it's real. Just don't confuse it with the finish line. We still have a long way to go. But progress is better than no progress. The distance between the physics works and utilities are actually buying power under contract. That's still most of the journey. All right, now here's the sharpest financial question in the whole episode. And there's no clean way to answer it yet. 4 models on the table right now. Model 1, the utility socialization. The utility builds it, spreads it across every customer. Problem becomes obvious. Your neighbor's grandmother might be subsidizing infrastructure built to serve one AI campus. Model 2, direct assessment. The AI company pays for exactly what its load requires. Problem, separating dedicated upgrades from ones that help the whole network is genuinely messy in practice. Model 3, bring your own capacity. The AI company finances the generator directly. This is exactly what Meta, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft are doing with nuclear right now. Problem? Even with your own dedicated generation, you still need the regional grid. Reserves, outages, balancing. Model 4, conditional service. Connect faster in exchange for cutting consumption when the system actually is under stress. This is basically where PJM is headed. Problem, not every AI workload can actually interrupt. And a curtailed campus might just fire up a diesel generator instead of actually helping the grid. Here's the line worth remembering. Behind the meter does not mean outside the system. Even a data center that finances its own private reactor still needs the grid for refueling, maintenance, and unplanned outages, and unplanned trip and startup. This is the coordination problem we warned about back in episode 6. AI isn't the story. Infrastructure sequencing is. Generation, transmission, storage, capital, and regulation only work if they move together. You can't finance your way out of that alignment. You can only buy a better position inside it. Nobody actually escapes the sequencing problem. They just negotiate a different spot in the line. Step back for a few seconds. Look at what these companies are actually doing. Function by function, not label by label. They're forecasting multi-gigawatt demand years out, signing long-term generation contracts, funding new capacity directly, prepaying for fuel, choosing which reactor technologies to bet on, negotiating their own grid access and interconnection terms, supporting transmission and water infrastructure at their own sites, building flexible load strategies to manage curtailment risks, and under NERC's emerging framework, possibly taking on direct reliability obligations. None of that makes Google, Meta, Amazon, or Microsoft a regulated utility. Back in our previous episodes, we put it plainly. Data centers aren't tech infrastructure with power attached. They're energy infrastructure with computers attached. Right here is that idea all grown up. From simply buying electricity to structuring an entire power supply end to end. And that's the actual transformation this episode is about. Not nuclear is good for AI. It's this. AI companies are starting to do the job that used to belong exclusively to utilities and grid planners. And nuclear just happens to be the technology that rewards that kind of long horizon commitment the most. A viewer once asked me, could liquid salt reactors become the power engine behind artificial intelligence? Honest answer, maybe. But the more important story isn't the reactor, it's the contract. PJM's shortfall and this new backstop rules are turning "can you connect me" into "what are you bringing with you?" FERC's told every major grid operator in the country to rewrite the rulebook. NERC is close to treating the biggest data centers as reliability participants, not just customers with a meter. And right into that exact gap, big tech showed up as the customer nuclear has needed for decades. Willing to sign 20-year contracts, fund uprates, prepay for fuel, carry first-of-a-kind risks. Hermes 2 is not proof that liquid salt reactors can power hyperscale AI. Someone showed up who can actually pay for it. Go ahead, Big Daddy. So what's next? Depends on whether PJM's backstop actually closes the gap by September 30th. Whether NERC standards survive industry ballot on August 19th. Whether Keros, TerraPower, Oklo, and the rest can actually turn criticality into commercial electricity on schedule. And whether India's private capital experiment and Pakistan's surplus power bet turn out to be genuine alternatives to the American model, or just a different name for the same sequencing problem. Put the whole catalog together and it reads like a long argument. Episode 6, AI Isn't the Story, Infrastructure Sequencing Is, said digital systems don't float in the cloud. They anchor to electrons. Episode 10, Where AI Will Actually Live, said AI doesn't go where the talent is. It goes where the power is. And our last episode, I can't remember if it's 18, 19, or 17, one of them, it's From Hash Rate to Hyperscale, said AI doesn't want to curtail ever. And this episode, episode 21, is just the bill arriving. This is the new financial world powering tomorrow. Until next time, learn, adapt, and prosper. And as always, stay energized, people.